Hello lovely bakers, welcome to the 3 PM bake along. This is a pre-recorded bake so I will not see your comments. Today we are making pineapple upside down cake. Now if you remember the disaster that was the apple upside down cake, you'll know that we may have needed another recipe so that you guys could actually bake apple upside down cake without setting fire to your kitchen. So I've revised the recipe and we're going to make it again today but using pineapple instead of apple. But if you want to make it using apple, carry on. All you need to do is prepare your apples as we did in the first time round. Peel your apples, core your apples and slice them into eighths? Into eighths. However, we are going to do pineapple, so we need to prepare our pineapple. I'm going to move my camera down a bit so that you can see how I'm doing this. There we go. Right, so I've got some fresh pineapple, the bottom half, or bottom third of a fresh pineapple, and I'm going to chop off the end, as we do not want that. And then I'm going to chop my pineapple as thinly as I can, about 1/2 centimetre thick, very carefully so I don't chop off my fingers. And I want kind of about, I'd say, 5 slices. So we're just going to slice right through the pineapple, trying to keep, disaster number 1, trying to keep the slice even all the way through. You might need to make it a little bit thicker so that you get a full slice, just like that. But carry on carefully. You can use tinned pineapple for this. It works just as well and you don't have to worry about preparing your pineapple. However, I do not have any tinned pineapple and didn't want to go to the shop again, so I'm using fresh pineapple. Now, ta-da! So I've got some slices of pineapple there. I'm going to keep my pineapple with me just in case I need some more. Now what I'm going to do is stack up my slices again on top of each other so that I can remove the skin all in one go. This makes things a lot quicker when taking the skin off. And I'm literally just going to slice the skin off. And so I'll end up with kind of slightly hexagonal pineapple slices, but it's going to look really nice in my cake anyway, so you don't have to worry about that. It's not as if they have to be perfectly round, is it? I quite like a hexagonal pineapple slice. So there we go, just chopping off the skin very carefully so that we don't chop off our fingers. That rogue slice at the bottom doesn't want to move. And then we are going to remove the core of our pineapple. So just make sure all the skin has come off and you've got all your slices there. Great, so now we need to remove the core. Now I found, since we're using quite thin slices, I am going to use a piping nozzle to remove the core of my pineapple. I'm just going to press it down, give it a wiggle, and out comes the core. I don't know how I get it back out of the... Then you use a very sophisticated baking tool, mini screwdriver, to pop the pineapple out of the, there we go, out of the cutter. Ta-da! 1 slice of pineapple ready to go. Now we need to continue this with all of our slices. Obviously, if you are using tinned pineapple, you don't have to do any of this. You can just get on with the next steps of your bake. So, use my tool again. Hang on a minute, there we go. Who knew that it was going to get so stuck? These things that you come across as you're baking, everything is a learning curve. I'm just going to turn it around, use my sophisticated baking tool. Dear me, this is a bit of a... This wasn't the best way to do this now, was it? Should have bought those tin pineapples, shouldn't I? But I'm nearly done, look. That's the last one. My rogue slice. Right, so once our pineapple is all prepared, we can move on to preparing the tins we need for our bake. Now, if you happen to watch the apple upside down cake recipe, you'll know that it was a little bit of a disaster because the caramel leaked out of my cake tins. I didn't line my cake tins. I put a little bit too much caramel in and it all leaked out into the oven, setting fire to the oven. So I'm going to line my tins today. Now I'm using 2 6-inch cake tins to make mine. However, the best thing to use to make one big cake is a 9-inch cake tin. So if you have a 9-inch cake tin, that will be perfect. If you only have a smaller cake tin, still use your smaller cake tin, but you won't be able to use all of your cake batter. That was another one of the problems that I came across. So I'm going to line each of my tins with foil. That way the caramel is not going to seep out of the tin onto the base of the oven and set fire to the oven. If you haven't watched it, I suggest you go and find it because it will really brighten up your day. About an hour and a half into the whole thing, I just set fire to the whole clean oven. And a fireman, my fireman friend, comes in to rescue me. Right, so let's avoid that today and line our tins. I didn't want to line them to start with because I was a little bit unsure of how it would change the look of the cake when I took it out, peeling off the foil. But it's better than setting fire to the kitchen, so we're just going to roll with it. Technically, this is literally just to keep the caramel in the tin. Right, there we go. We don't need to grease them or oil them. Similar reason. Right. And get your ovens on. They need to be heated up to 180 degrees. So get them on, get them warming up to 180 degrees. That's 160 degrees for a fan oven. Right, so a pineapple upside down cake or an apple upside down cake has a lovely fruit layer on the base with a caramel and then a sponge sitting on top. The caramel and the fruit flavour soaks into the sponge as it bakes to make it a delicious moist cake. So we need to prepare our caramel layer. Now the first time round we did a brown sugar and butter caramel. However, I've adjusted that and we are going to do a caster sugar caramel and we're going to use that. I think it'll be a little bit thicker and we won't have to worry about it going too granular. So that's what we're going to do. Come over with me. Oh, actually, we need to measure it first. Skipping it. So noisy in the kitchen today. Right, so we need 150 grams of caster sugar. 150 grams of caster sugar. There we go. Ta-da! And we also need 80 grams of butter. So I'm going to measure that out now so that we've got it ready to drop into our caramel. Now our caramel is going to take a little bit of time because we're going to be making it from caster sugar, and basically we're going to line the bottom of our frying pan with sugar and allow it to caramelise. It's a bit tricky, but I'm going to talk you through it so you don't have to worry. So measure out your 80 grams of butter into a dish. Oh, there we go. So that you've got it ready to put into our caramel. Now, I'm going to sprinkle my caramel, my sugar, my caster sugar, onto the base of a clean frying pan. Now the reason that I use a frying pan, I'm only going to put, that's it, is the sugar is going to melt from the bottom up, obviously, because that's where the heat is on the pan. And we want it to melt relatively evenly and we don't want it to burn. It starts to melt and then it burns relatively quickly. So we don't want it to burn. If you have a narrow pan and a deeper level of sugar, the bottom starts to melt and then starts to burn before the top layer has started to melt. Hence why it's better to use a wider, shallower pan so you can have a shallower layer of sugar. Now I'm going to put the rest on there. We're going to have quite a bit of caramel, but that's what's good, isn't it? Okay. Get it on a low heat on your pan, and we're just going to leave that We're going to leave it to caramelise, to liquefy, and it's going to be all fabulous and delicious. Now I'm just weighing my rest of my caster sugar because I've just realised I don't think I have any more caster sugar. So I will be using half caster sugar and half demerara sugar for my sponge. Again, that is absolutely fine. It's strange times. Some of the shops don't have certain ingredients. We don't want to be going to too many shops, so use what you've got in the fridge or in the cupboards, because you're always going to end up with a really tasty dessert, even if you've made a few adjustments to the recipe. So, we've prepared our pineapple. I see a little seed on there, and remove. Prepared our lovely pineapple, or apples if you're doing apples. Fresh pineapple does have little seeds in it, so just go through and make sure you've removed all the little spiky bits from the edges and any little seeds that there might be lingering around in your pineapple. Now this one, it's not even a full round because the slice didn't go all the way through, but that's absolutely fine because I'm using very small tins. I'm not going to be able to fit pineapples all the way around in rounds like you would in a big cake. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to half all of mine so that when I lie them in the tin, I can add a little bit more pineapple. And I'm going to just lay them out now so that I can see how they look. Whoop. What you basically want to do is cover the base of your cake tin in pineapple or in apples. So I'm going to put a little seed there. I'm just going to test it out and see how many we can get in. Lovely. And remember, this pineapple display is going to end up on the top of your cake. So when your cake is baked, you're going to flip it upside down and the bottom is going to become the top, hence upside down cake. So whatever display you do with your pineapples in the bottom of your tin, that's going to be the decoration on the top of your cake. So think about that. When you're displaying them, you can cut them into different shapes. You can make them look a little bit more interesting. You can shape them into flowers or something like that, whatever you like. So think about that because that will be the decoration on the top of your cake. And once your cake is baked, you can't change it. So make sure that you're happy with the look of your pineapple or the look of your apples. Obviously, if you're using perfect rounds from a tin, they're going to look really great anyway. But bear that in mind, if you're using fresh pineapple, make sure they're all a nice shape, they're all quite uniform in shape and things, because it's going to look really, really nice once it comes out of the oven. Right, now I'm going to bring you over, along with my pineapple, to the hob. I'm going to chuck away all the skin and all the bits and bobs of pineapple that I've cut away. Me, you, my pineapple and my butter are coming over to the hob. So come join me. Let's put this over here and bring you on over. Ooh, look, it's like you're flying. Lower your legs down a little bit. There we go. So that you can see what's going on over here. Oh, I've just put my kettle on. Don't need a cup of tea in this weather. It is a very hot and sticky day. Okay, there we go. Fab. So this is our pan. It's on a medium heat now, and we are allowing the sugar to melt and caramelise. Now you cannot touch this while it goes through this process. You've just got to leave it. I'm even going to open my door because it's so warm in here. Really lovely, sunny, hot and sticky day. So we're not going to touch this. We're not going to stir it. We're not going to do anything to it. We're just going to leave it to caramelise, and that is all you need to do. The hard part is not stirring it because you don't know what it's doing underneath. But underneath this top layer, all that sugar is starting to melt and caramelise. You can even start to smell it a little bit. But remember to keep your temperature of your hob low because there is a little bit of a thickness to the sugar. And underneath this top layer, the bottom is starting to melt and starting to caramelise, and if we're not careful, it will burn before it even reaches the sugar on the surface. So keep it on a low temperature and just keep an eye on it. We've got our caramel ready to go in, we've got our butter ready to go in, and we're ready to go pretty much. I'm going to bring my tins over as well and make sure they're all ready, because once our lovely pineapple and caramel is done, we're going to add it to our tins. Then all we need to do is make our sponge batter and get it in the oven to bake. Hopefully it won't set fire to the oven this time. Right, now I shall draw your attention to this area of the pan. Can you see how it's starting to become a bit translucent, a bit dark? You can see the bottom of the pan there. That's because this area underneath the layer of sugar is starting to melt and starting to caramelise, and that is just what we want. The temperature's still on relatively low, and you can see that. Here it is by the frying pan handle. So on relatively low, and this is what you're looking for. You're looking for this melting sugar look. Once it starts to do that, you can start to stir it. But you have to be very careful, because the more you stir dry sugar into caramel, the more likely it is that this is going to crystallise and you end up with big white chunks of sugar that never melt. So you want to take your time, resist the urge to stir until the very last minute. Move the pan around a bit so that the heat is distributed a bit more evenly. No, I'm not going to stir. See, it's tricky. I really want to stir it, but I want to get a bit more of caramelisation before I touch this sugar, just to make sure that we're not going to get any crystallisation. Because it is a big pan and it's on a small hob, we haven't got any melting around the edge yet, and normally I'd like to see a little bit of melting around the edge before I start to stir. As you can see over here, we're starting to get a bit of a translucency over here as well. So we know that it's working. We've just got to hold our nerve and let it carry on for just a little bit longer. The outcome of this, what you really want at the end of it, is quite a dark ambered coloured caramel. And we're going to start, see how this is joining together? We've got quite a good area now. I'm going to start to mix that a little bit, just to make sure that it's not burning. So now you can see all the underneath of this is starting to melt. And if we move it around, it's less likely to burn. So let's get it moving a little bit now. And be careful not to mix too much of the dry sugar with the caramel, because it will start to burn. I'm even going to lower down the heat of my hob. For the fear of burning, we do not want our caramel to burn, because if it burns, there's no coming back from it. We'll need to start again. So here we go. Wherever you can see that there's caramelisation under the surface, you can start to stir it. I'm going to move the pan around a little bit to get some of the heat distributed over there. And we just want to gently move the caramel around, incorporating a little bit at a time of that dry sugar. See over here, we want to be really careful over here. We don't want to incorporate this section too quickly, because none of that has melted. You almost want to like push the melted caramel on top of the dry sugar instead of the other way around, and that will kind of help it not to crystallise. Caramel is a fickle mistress. We have to be careful with it. We have to treat it gently so that it doesn't do naughty things. And as always, remember, this is going to be really, really hot. So please, please be careful. We don't want anyone burning themselves. We don't want anyone burning their kitchens to the ground. So let's just take it easy, everyone. Okay, I'm going to mix in that sugar. Now, you'll be able to see here it's kind of cloudy, and that's because there are sugar granules in the caramel that haven't melted. So we just want to mix them in and allow them to melt slowly. The majority of it is now caramel. Feeling confident to mix those unmelted bits of sugar in, and we're going to put it back onto a medium heat so that all of that can melt. Crank it up a little bit. Now you have to wait until all that sugar has dissolved and melted and caramelized before we put our sugar in. So pay attention as well to your spatula, because your spatula is going to have a lot of that sugar stuck to it. You want to remove it from your spatula and get it back down to the heat so that it can melt. There we go. Leave that on there again. You can start to see areas where it's melting again, where it's going more translucent and less cloudy. That's just what you want. It's easier to stir as well the more that it melts. But we want to really keep an eye on it through this stage because it burns really quickly. So if you start to smell burning, or if you start to see any areas that are going very dark, take it off the heat straight away and put in your butter. For me, this is still looking good. We've got no burning, and I just want to keep mixing it. Still got some areas here where there's not crystallized but granular sugar. Some areas there of granular sugar that I want to make sure dissolve into the rest of the caramel. I'm moving my pan around so that the heat touches all the areas of the pan evenly. Looks lovely. It's quite therapeutic watching caramel melt, isn't it? Look at that. It's getting there now. I'm going to really keep an eye on it, and I'm going to be ready with my butter as soon as it gets to a nice dark amber colour and all those granules of sugar have melted. I'm going to whack in the butter. Now the butter is going to cool this right down. It's going to stop it from burning. So if you fear that your caramel is burning, add your butter. But it's also going to really sizzle. So I want you to be careful and step back when you add your butter, because you do not want boiling caramel going onto your skin. It will burn you like lava. Right, see how much darker that is now? Getting nice and dark. It's all quite see-through. I'm confident that there's no granular sugar left in there. Scrape my spatula. Be careful that your spatula doesn't flick caramel at you. Great, I'm happy with that. Now in goes the butter. Now don't be alarmed. It's gonna spit like a mother. Here we go. Add your butter and just mix it in. The cool butter will cool down your caramel. So keep the heat on, just a medium to low heat. And I'm going to mix that butter into our lovely caramel. Fabulous! This is just what we want. This is going well. Keeping the heat on, not too high. And as you mix very gently, your butter will incorporate with your caramel. Just allow it to stop sizzling, and then keep mixing. I'm going to lower my heat down a bit lower, and we just want all that butter to incorporate into the caramel. That's all we're waiting for now. So you'll have a runny layer of butter on top of your caramel. That's absolutely fine. It will combine with the rest as it reheats. It's going to bubble up and sizzle just like it does when we're making caramel for millionaire shortbread, and that's what we're looking for. So we're just going to allow it to come back up to temperature. I've hired up my hob to medium again, and we're going to let it bubble up. Bubble up, bubble up, bubble up. There we go. Good. Don't be put off by the layer of butter on top of your caramel. That will incorporate into everything else. Just keep mixing and keep the temperature up, and all will be well. Sail away, sail away. I don't know, I've got that song stuck in my head now. It's bubbling. Every day I'm bubbling. And we should get that temperature a little bit higher. Still not on full temperature wise. It's on a low hob and it's on kind of medium to high. So we just want to get it all up, bubbling up and frothy, like we do with brown sugar and butter when making Millionaire Shortbread Caramel. Difference with this is we are not going to add any cream or any condensed milk to it. We're just going to let it bubble up until all that butter is incorporated, and then we're going to add our caramel, our pineapple for a little bit. Caramelise our pineapple. So already you can see that that butter is starting to mix in with the hot sugar to make a lovely buttery caramel. It's going to be sublime when I mix it around. Remember there was a big layer of runny butter on top? That has almost completely mixed in now. I'm just going to let it bubble away for a few more minutes, and then I'm going to very gently place in my pineapple. And again, it's going to spit at you, so be very careful. It's going to sizzle because it's cold pineapple hitting very hot sugar. Give it a little bit of a mix. Let it bubble up. We want to be certain that all that butter is mixed in. We don't want any of the grease on the top, because you will get an oily cake if you don't make sure that all that butter is incorporated into the caramel. Oh, it looks lovely. It's getting a bit darker in colour, just what I want to see. I'm going to lower the temperature down, and here goes the pineapple. I'm just lying it in on top of the caramel very carefully so it doesn't sizzle at me too much. Perfect. Again, this is going to cool down our caramel a little bit. And we can kind of mix this a little bit, mix it around. Just allowing the caramel to coat the pineapple and cook the pineapple a little bit. Because I'm using fresh pineapple, we want to give that pineapple a little bit of softening down. I'm going to eat this bit. Allow that caramel to coat the pineapple, and it's going to soften our fresh pineapple a little bit. I'm going to try and flip my pineapple one slice at a time, flip it over, and then have it lying against the base of the pan. So move all your slices of pineapple around so that each one is just lying on the bottom of the pan. Be gentle with them, you don't want them to break apart, we want them whole when we add them to our cake. We just go through one at a time, flipping each little bit of pineapple over so that we know both sides have had a little mix in that caramel. Already, compared to the apple upside down cake, our caramel is looking like a much better texture. It's much thicker, which means it's much less likely to slide out of the bottom of our cake tin and into our oven. Also, the nice thing about this is the caramel takes on a bit of the flavour of the pineapple when we put our pineapple in. If you're using tinned pineapple, you don't actually have to do this. You can skip this step and just line your tin with your tinned pineapple and then pour the caramel on top. But I quite like to add the pineapple to the caramel first. Softens the pineapple a little bit and gives the caramel a bit of a pineapple-y flavour. It's looking fabulous. It's just what we want to see. Nice bubbly caramel, Smells wonderful as well. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to turn our heat off. And let that bubble for a little bit longer. Turn off the heat, and we are going to very carefully place our pineapple into our lined cake tin. So I'm going to use little fork so that I can fish out my pineapple. Again, this mixture is going to be very, very hot, so be careful when you lift out your pineapple. And just line the bottom of your cake tin in a nice display with your pineapple. However you want to do it, in a little circle. You could split it up and fan it out a little bit more, kind of like a sun rays or something like that. You could use all sorts of different fruit and make yourself like a little piece of artwork. Why not? Now we are going to allow our caramel to bubble a little bit more, simply because the juices from the pineapple have gone into the caramel and will start to thin it out a little bit. And we want our caramel to be relatively thick so that it can sit at the bottom of our tin and not run out. So I'll put the heat back on my caramel and I'm going to let it bubble on its own, stirring it continuously for just a couple of minutes, just to thicken it up a bit. Now make sure you keep stirring. This is going to help to stop your caramel from burning. But again, keep an eye on it. If it goes a bit too dark, if it starts to smell, if you start to smell any sort of burning, take it off the heat straight away. And all I'm looking to do is just kind of cook off a bit of that liquid that's come out of the pineapple and just thicken up the caramel a little bit more. And then we're going to spoon it into the bottom of our tins. Now there's quite a lot of caramel here, and we don't need all of it to go into our cake tin, so we're going to save a little bit of it and use it as a coating when our cakes come out of the oven. Looking good. Let it bubble up for a couple of minutes. Fab. That's all it needs, just a couple of minutes bubbling away. And you can see it's already starting to thicken. When you kind of bring your spatula through it, it's kind of all a little bit gloopy, and it will thicken up a lot as it cools. So I'm going to use a little spoon, and I want you to just put a couple of spoons of this caramel into your tins. So I'm going to show you here. We're just going to pour a little bit of the caramel into the base of our tin. It's already starting to thicken on the spoon. And what we want is just a thin layer of caramel at the bottom of our tin. We don't want too much, we don't want it swamping the cake. Perfect. There we have it. Pineapple with a little layer of caramel. Repeat with your other tin. Well, you're probably only using one tin, so carry on with your one tin and spoon a little bit of your caramel on top of your pineapple in the bottom of your cake tin. And then we're going to leave this to cool while we whip up our cake batter. Our cake batter is really going to be simple to make. It's just an all-in-one method. We're going to bung all the ingredients into our bowl, whip it up, and then it's going to go on top of these. Fab. We're going to leave that for now, but we'll come back to it once our cake comes out of the oven. Come back with me. And here we are, back at the table, ready to whip up our sponge. There we go. Hi everyone. Right then, so you need a bowl. Ooh. And you need your electric hand whisk as well. Electric whisk. Over here. Oh. Fab. Again, as I say, this is an all-in-one method. Nice and quick and easy. All we need to do is put all of our ingredients into our bowl, whisk it together, and then put it into our tins. Now I'm just kind of realise that there's an area of the bottom of this tin that hasn't got any caramel on it. So I'm just going to put a little bit on. You want to make sure that the base of your cake tin is completely covered in caramel. I'm much more pleased with this caramel. It's a lot thicker than when we made it with the apple turnover cake. Looking lovely. Right then, so we need to measure out 115 grams of self-raising flour. I didn't know what it was. Self-raising flour. So we're going to sieve it in. We want a nice light sponge. So we are going to sieve 115 grams of self-raising flour. Just 115 grams. This is a really nice simple sponge recipe. We're also going to add 125 grams of caster sugar. Now I might have just enough. It's a really nice simple sponge recipe, but you can upgrade it if you want to with maybe some desiccated coconut, make it like a tropical cake. You could also put in some bits of pineapple into your sponge if you wanted to. If you're going to do that, I would, oh my gosh, look at that, 26 grams, perfect. Sieve that in. Yeah, you could put in some chunks of pineapple. If you're going to use fresh pineapple or tinned pineapple, I would chop it up quite small and dry it with a tea towel before putting it into your cake, and that will ensure that it doesn't all sink to the bottom or sink to the top. Why not? Let it sink to the top. It's an upside down cake, it'd be great. So yeah, think about the ways that you can upgrade your sponge. I'm just doing a very nice simple sponge because all that wonderful caramel is going to soak into it anyway, and we are going to pour a bit of the extra caramel on top when it comes out of the oven. Because who doesn't like extra caramel? I'm not going to put it in yet because I don't want it to disrupt the baking of the cake like before. So we are going to put in 115 grams of butter. 115 grams of butter. So you've had 115 grams of both butter and self-raising flour, and then 125 grams of caster sugar. Then we are also going to add to this 2 eggs. Come to me, eggs. Woo! My trusty green pen has just dropped off the table. 2 eggs. Now, if you're not very confident with cracking eggs, I would put your eggs in a separate bowl first, instead of cracking them directly into your cake mix. This just makes it easier to fish out any shell. 2 eggs going in. And you can add a little bit of vanilla, a little bit of flavouring at this point, anything you like. I happen to have some buttery caramel flavouring, so I'm going to add a few little drops of that into there, and that's it. That's all our cake needs. Get that whisked up until it's all incorporated, all nice and smooth. This is an all-in-one, so we're just literally chucking all the ingredients in and whisking it up, and that's all there is to it. Whisking it up, get them muscles working. Now it might not look like a lot of batter, but you don't actually need a lot of cake batter. A traditional upside down pineapple cake is quite thin, it's not very thick. And I want you to remember that when you're smoothing your batter into your cake tins. Think about how it's going to rise. So you want to spoon your cake batter in so it's in quite a thin layer on top of the pineapple. There we go. Get right to the bottom of the bowl, make sure there's no bits of sugar or flour stuck in there. Bit of turbo at the end there. And that's our cake batter done. Now, I'm going to bring over my tins to show you the kind of thickness you're looking for. I'm going to double check my oven temperature, make sure we're at 180, lower it down ever so slightly, and let's spoon in our cake batter. So our caramel is starting to cool now and getting quite sticky. So we just want to spoon in our cake batter on top of our pineapple and just spread it out. Don't need it to be too thick, You need it to get all through the edges and spread it out nice and even. There we go, next one. So you don't have to use all of your cake batter. If you think it looks like quite a lot, as long as your pineapple and your caramel layer are all covered and you can spread it out throughout the tin, then you don't have to use all your cake batter if you don't want to. It should be kind of, I suppose, an inch kind of thick. That's what I'd think of. Spread out your mix. And there you have it. Ready to go in the oven. In they go at 180 degrees. And that is going to be in there for about half an hour. Okay. Great. And now, because it's pre-recorded, here comes your lovely hyperlapse of the cake cooking in the oven. Who doesn't want to watch that? Come with me and we'll see cake baking in the oven. Come down. That's better. Right, see you in a mo. Welcome back. So, our cake, well, my cakes have been in the oven for 20 minutes. Now, I'm using 2 small tins, so my cakes are pretty much done now. However, if you are using bigger tins, deeper tins, one single 9-inch tin, then your cake will probably need about 30 minutes. So, leave it to cook, keep an eye on it, watch the surface, make sure it's not getting too dark, and I will show you how to test it. We test it like we test any other sponge cake. We do 2 tests. The first test is to touch the surface of the cake. If the surface of the cake dips and then remains dipped, it's not done, it needs longer in the oven. If you touch the surface of the cake and it springs back up, it's done. And you can always tell it's quite firm and springy instead of smushy. If your finger gets imprinted into the cake, definitely needs more time. The second test, and one that might not work quite so well with this recipe because of the caramel content, is we stick a skewer or a metal knife into the middle of the cake and remove it. And if the skewer and the knife is clean, your cake is cooked. If it has cake mixture on, needs longer in the oven. However, it's going to be tricky with this one because of the caramel at the bottom. We might come out with some caramel on the end of our skewer. However, let's have a look at our cake and I will show you, and we'll be able to tell. You'll be able to tell if it's done or not. Let's lower this down so you can see a bit better. Right. Oh, yeah. It's got like a caramel swirl on the surface. You see that? Springy sponge. Springy sponge. Good work. So, if you've done a springy sponge test and it's sprung back up well, you don't even need to do the skewer test because that shows you that your sponge is cooked. Smells wonderful. I'm so excited that it's actually worked this time. But the final test is turning out the cake. Now we need to do this relatively quickly because, why? Our cake is an upside down cake. It's not finished until it's turned. So, let's do it. If I seem nervous, it's because I am. Oh, let's turn off our oven. Oh, the other thing I want you to do, back here, I've got our pan of caramel. Now it's dried firm. So I want you to pop the heat back on your caramel. Because we want that to start to melt down a little bit so we can use it as a drizzle for our cake. Now what I'm going to do is there's some bits of sponge that I can see that are stuck to the tin, even though we've put foil on it. So I'm just going to make sure that none of the cake is stuck. Plate over the cake, and we're going to flip it, and that's all there is to it. Are we ready? Are we ready? Ta-da! Now this is a loose bottom tin, so as soon as I turn it upside down, whoop, tin's going to come out. It's going to come out anyway because we put foil in it. Oh, have we got any leaking? Try and get that tin off. Now this is where I'm worried that maybe the foil has ruined the lovely look of our cake, but it's a means to an end. We can't have burnt ovens now, can we? Now it's going to be hot, there's going to be steam coming off it. Ooh, look! There's a little bit of cake stuck to my foil. But that's what you want. You want a nice golden caramel layer, there's a little bit of cake removed, with your pineapple in there. Now my pineapple has kind of spread apart, so something to remember for the future, the more caramel, the more coverage you're going to get. But that is exactly how you want your upside down cake to look. I'm excited by this. Let's do the other one. Dun, dun, dun. In fact, what I might do is I might go around the edge of the foil just to make sure that none of the cake sticks to the foil. And just kind of remove the cake from the edge of the foil. That way the foil won't tear any of our sponge, will it? There we go. Perfect. I'm sure the first time I ever made these was a few years ago now, but I did not use any sort of lining to my cake tin. So I must have used a different cake tin for these, because they always worked and I never had to line them. But I only have a couple of cake tins. So it had to have been one like that, with a loose bottom, or one of the springform cake tins. Maybe a springform cake tin would be better. Ooh, now that's better. No sponge on my foil. Oh, it smells amazing. Cake! Right then, we're going to melt down our caramel. Oh, it's already melted. Perfect. So you just need to heat it long enough so that it's liquid. And we are going to use this to give our cake a little bit of an extra caramel coating, because who doesn't like caramel? That spoon is glued with caramel. So I'm going to scrape my spatula and I'm going to use a different spoon. And all I'm going to do is, especially around the edges where the foil has kind of pulled a bit of the sponge off, I'm going to just spoon the caramel and spread it on. And the cake is still really hot, so the caramel will kind of absorb a little bit into the sponge and we'll get a nice, lovely, soft sponge. Don't want too much because we still want to be able to see a bit of the pineapple on the surface. And we're just going to kind of spread and almost brush a bit of the extra caramel. Let it dribble down the sides. Oh, I just love caramel. Oh! I'm not supposed to be eating cake until the weekend. Might tell Jim that I only made one cake. And eat the other one. But that means I have to eat the whole thing before he gets home, or he'll know. Oh well. Extra caramel. And there you have caramel upside down cake that didn't melt my oven. Yes! We did it! We did it! We baked some cake together! Now, slight disappointment is I didn't use more pineapple. Should have used more pineapple to get more of that pineapple on top. If you're using apple, you can put the apple really close together, because as the cake bakes, the pineapple shrinks, the fruit shrinks and moves away from each other. But still a pineapple upside down cake, isn't it? Still going to be delicious. So there we go. I hope your caramel upside down cakes turned out well, whatever fruit you chose to use. Send me pictures if you do decide to make this. And if you melt your oven, I apologise. Lining is the way forward. But there you go, another good bake. I hope you have a lovely day, wherever you are and whatever you are doing, and I will see you again for another Level A Bake. Thanks everyone. Thanks for watching. Bye.